Now, then every sprint, per that picture I was showing earlier, as we're doing planning, I will try to designate some amount of known debt to fix that sprint. Typically, the stuff in the code I know I'm going to be in anyway. I'm in the code already. Why wouldn't I clean up the debt in the areas where they're going to affect me already? So I would deal with that. And of course, just to be economically smart about what we do, we favor servicing technical debt that has a high interest rate versus technical debt that has a low interest rate. That's the big picture. Refer back to it at your discretion. Let me illustrate some of the key pieces here. All right, first, the approaches I want to talk about. Don't service all technical debt. It doesn't all have to be repaid. Come back to that in a moment. We're going to apply the Boy Scout rule when servicing technical debt. So I'm going to explain that. We'll repay the high interest technical debt before we repay the low. We always repay incrementally. And then finally, I want to repay technical debt when I'm doing customer valuable work. This will get me out of this problem of having to convince the product owner to give up features to have me go repay technical debt. Let me illustrate. First, there's some clear reasons, and we've already talked about a couple, where we wouldn't repay the debt. If your product's nearing end of life, you know what, we're going to retire the system in 6 months. It's been in production for 10 years. It's, we're 3 generations of technology newer. It's time to rebuild this thing. So in 6 months, we're going to replace the system. I don't think anybody here wants to spend a lot of time repaying technical debt in the system, right? We're going to declare bankruptcy on that system, retire the debt, be done, move on. That seems sensible. Or maybe we're just doing a throwaway prototype. Proof of concept, study, experiment, spike, use your favorite term. They all mean the same thing to me. The act of buying information. Well, if you're buying information, the value is the information, not necessarily the artifact you created to acquire the information. So if you want to cover a lot of terrain on an avant-garde, research or prototyping mission, it's best to tell people up front, we're just going to throw away the prototype. That wasn't the valuable asset. The valuable asset was knowledge. Versus evolutionary prototypes, where you build it and you would evolve that into the final product. So if it was a throwaway prototype, I don't worry about the technical debt. That's not the issue. I'm going to throw away the asset anyway. Or if you're building it for the short life, a la the example of the derivatives trading system. So clearly, your goal isn't to pay back all that. So I made the argument for that, and that is the example of the, it's built for a short life. So the slides to explain what I just said, and then the knowledge acquisition one. So if you're not familiar with knowledge acquisition stories, they can tend to look like those. I'm okay with those in my product backlog. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can do on any project is a knowledge acquisition story. Write it, move it right to the top of the backlog, because buying that information, buying that knowledge is the next most important thing. We'll do that. All right. Another one of our strategies here is we're going to apply one of the important Boy Scout rules. Boy Scouts have a number of rules. One that's particularly apropos here, always leave the campground cleaner than you found it. That seems like a good rule. Right? If you're a Boy Scout and you show up at the campground and the campers before you made a mess, you cleaned it up. Even if you didn't make the mess. Why? Because you always leave the campground cleaner than you found it for the next set of campers, not messier than you found it. I think if we applied that rule every time we were in code, it would be much better. How does that apply? Every time you're in the code, you leave the code a little cleaner than you found it, not a little messier than you found it. Please.
So going back to the point of refactoring and whether or not it should be part of the backlog. So one challenge with refactoring and also with our attempt to one challenge with refactoring and also our attempt to fix technical debt is what we fix could end up causing other problems or other issues. I think that assumes that we have a very high level of test coverage. Otherwise, so
well said. Well said. I mean, I made that comment about automated test. I will show you why all roads lead to Rome. And Rome here is automated testing. Automated testing is like the net underneath the trapeze artist. You're willing to be a little bit more aggressive on the trapeze because you know if you miss, the net will catch you before the ground catches you. So you'll be more aggressive. If you have automated testing, you're going to be a bit more aggressive on your refactoring, right? Because I'm pretty comfortable that if I screw it up, the automated test suite will very quickly capture and point out where I made a mistake. If you don't have automated tests, the cost of your refactoring has just gone up. Because if you have huge manual testing debt, and then you're sitting there staring at that code going, that really does need to be cleaned up and refactored. But if I start going into that code, which I don't really have to do right now, and I mess around in that code, let's make sure we define refactoring and agree. Refactoring, changing the structure of the code, but not the behavior of the code. So it's got to work exactly the same as it did when you were done as it did before you started the refactoring. Okay, well, there's only one way you can ensure that. You have to run the regression test suite, and if the only way you can do the regression testing is manually, the cost of refactoring went up, and you will not do it as often as you should because it's now expensive. It is a vicious cycle. And the only way to get off that cycle, you should start automating your tests, or you simply won't do the refactoring, which is your principal technique. What I'm saying is a good Boy Scout, you refactor all the time. To your point earlier, refactoring isn't like, oh, I do sloppy stuff for 8 days and on the 9th day I'll clean it up. You're always refactoring, builds the skills. It forces you. Remember, if I told you you had to release every day, you'd figure out a way to do it. If I told you you have to refactor all the time, you'd figure out how to do it efficiently. Because you've got to do it all the time. So you remove happen upon debt when you happen upon it. You're in the sprint, you see the debt, you clean it up, right? And if it can't be cleaned up, hey, maybe when this passed through the campground, we noticed the outhouse was destroyed. Don't have enough time this pass. I got a sprint goal I'm trying to meet. Might not have enough time on this pass through the campground to rebuild the outhouse, so I create a card, put it up on the wall, and say, outhouse needs to be rebuilt. That way, next time I know I'm going to that campground, maybe I do budget more time. To say, hey, this time when we're going through, we know it's there. We didn't know it before, but now we do. Let's plan to clean it up. So, be a good Boy Scout. Please.
I have a question. Is how you catch up with the automation test case during the sprint? So normally when you start the sprint, you don't close the story in the beginning of the sprint. You close the story in the sprint. So how you catch up with the automation testing during the sprint?
That is a very dangerous way to live. You know, if all your stories are being completed at the end of the sprint, as an observation, yeah, you're running a mini waterfall inside your sprint, right? I mean, is that really what people truly believe is that the only way to do it?
Maybe few stories got closed in the middle of the sprint and used in the beginning end of the sprint. So how you manage them is automation?
You're automating all along, right? I mean, you have, if you're doing a test-first development strategy, you're writing the test before you're writing any of the code. So the most you would ever have to test at the end of the sprint is the last little piece that you just finished building, of which you already had a test ready and waiting for it. And of course, since everything is automated, you would just simply push the button, rerun the full automated regression test at the end of the sprint, and you would know everything was done. And then, of course, you would just push it to production because you have such a high level of confidence that it all works. All right, I'll grant you most companies aren't there yet, but why wouldn't that at least be a goal to consider? Rethink the way you're doing your sprints. You have a flow management problem during your sprints. Okay. Repay technical debt incrementally. Don't make large balloon payments against your debt. Repaying debt incrementally is like paying off your monthly mortgage, right? Pay off your home mortgage by making monthly payments. The idea is you don't ever want debt to accrue to the point where you have to create a product backlog item, insert it in, and say refactor X. To me, it feels like, oh, you let technical debt spiral out of control to the point where you now need to make a balloon payment against your debt. If you'd been a good Boy Scout all along, managing your debt incrementally, you wouldn't find yourself in this position. Don't do that. It's bad practice. Any sensible person is going to pay off their 19% credit card debt before they pay off their 4.5% home loan. I mean, anybody's got any financial sense at all is going to do that. Not all debt accrues interest at the same rate. You know, oh, you know, there's that code over there and that module way over there. We almost never go into that code and do anything. And yeah, I know there's some debt in there, but there's not a really high probability that code's going to fail in a miserable way and bring our system down. So I don't know, that's kind of low interest debt to me. I don't know that, I may never pay that back. On the other hand, this thing right over here, This module that we go into every single day, have to make changes there all the time, have to dance around all those shortcuts. We're paying a lot of interest on this one. Pay that one back first. So, look, I understand it's a lofty goal to have no technical debt. I wouldn't set my goal so aggressive, right? Pay back the high interest stuff, the stuff that's really causing the problems today. And then others as it becomes big. Pay that back. As a rule, we all use that term sort of, analysis paralysis, things like that. Oh, the problem's so big, I'm stuck, I can't even get started. I see something similar on technical debt and company. I got a mountain of debt. Okay, we'll get started. I got a mountain of debt. It's like overwhelming, and they're like getting depressed. I don't know where do I start. It's like, fine, go after the molehill. Start on something. Build the practices. Get the attitude going that, yeah, we do pay back debt incrementally. You're going to pay back the mountain incrementally. May not even ever pay back all the mountain, but some of it. So I want to start with something we can manage to get some wins, to prove that we could do it. Just whet the appetite. Yeah, you know what, this is a tractable thing. It's not going to be done in days or weeks. It's going to take months to years on big systems, but that's okay. You got to start somewhere. So bite off a piece you can actually do and do it, and then you'll start saying, that doesn't look like such a big mountain anymore. No, it works for me. Okay. Now the key is always repay debt when you're performing customer valuable work. This is why I'm not obfuscating anything from the product owner. We're doing valuable work for them. Part of doing valuable work as good Boy Scouts is we keep the code clean. So we're cleaning it up. I'm putting in new features for you. Why do you care what I'm doing at the tech? If your product owner truly cares about all the tasks that you're performing at a detailed technical level, you're being micromanaged. They shouldn't care. As a product owner, I don't care a thing one about your tasks. Sorry, I don't, right? I care about product backlog items. I care about your tasks. That's your business. So if you need to do stuff like that, I prefer not having to refactor X in my product backlog because you guys are doing it all the time. Think about the advantages of aligning debt reduction work with performing customer valuable work. First, the product owner can always properly prioritize the backlog, so I'm not throwing at them technical things that they may have no clue in the world what they mean or how to value them. So I eliminate the problem of asking them to do something that they inherently can't do. And I have to make some kind of argument that's going to convince them. It clarifies